I do think this is worthy of continuing to discuss. A lot of people just accepted the 350 some odd $1 million verdict against Donald Trump in New York. But as much as Buck and myself and many of you think this is crazy, I actually think the people who think it's craziest are real estate developers and high net worth individuals with substantial assets in New York. One of them would be Kevin O'Leary. Many of you know him from Shark Tank. He's been on this program. I believe we had him as a guest in the last several months. He pointed out what is very important to recognize here. There was no victim here of this alleged fraud. Here was that analysis with Neil Cavuto. Listen.
Wouldn't there be many companies who would not want to do business or loan money to people like yourself or investors if they know that they can get away with fraud and there's no recourse to protect them?
Excuse me, what fraud? This is not about Trump anymore. When you get a developer that builds a building and he says it's worth $400 million and he wants to borrow $200 million from a bank, which happens every day, everywhere on earth, including every American city, every developer is an entrepreneur. They shine the light on their building and they say it's worth 400. The bank does its own due diligence, as was done in this case, because they're very good at it. The banks are very good, and they say, no, it's worth 300. We're only going to loan you 150 million. That haggling has gone on for decades. That's how it works. And then in this case, even the bank that was supposedly defrauded testified and said, we didn't lose anything. We want to do business with this guy again. We'd like to. But the judge said, no, 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 no. Let's penalize this developer for $355 million. And if we're going to do that, let's penalize all the developers all across America. They've all done the same thing. All of them should go to jail, and we should stop building buildings.
That's CNN's Laura Coates. All right, so he's pointing out how absurd the logic is for this entire case. And then, Buck, he builds on something else, which you have experienced, and which I don't ever want to experience, which is what it's like to be living behind the big blue wall of New York. Here he is saying, look, a lot of people are going to be making the decisions based on this result to pull assets out of New York. Listen.
The fine people of New York should ask themselves, why are we such a loser state? How are we going to attract business? It's not just the existing businesses that are fleeing out to Texas and Florida. What about new money like this that I'm talking about, like a $4 billion data center? Not a chance I would put that in New York. Zero probability, never. And so they've got a lot of work to do to find themselves getting out of this situation. This has all occurred post-pandemic. Winner states versus loser states. Look at Tennessee right now, fastest growing city in America, Nashville. Winner state, good policy, competitive taxes. You've got to start thinking about this in the context of winners and losers. New York, mega loser state.
Okay, we have a lot of people listening on WOR in New York. Buck, you lived in New York City for a long time. We also have massive audience in Texas, Florida, Tennessee, 3 states that have no state income tax. As you get ready to pay your taxes in 2023, right, coming up in April, Buck, how much does it make you sick, the idea that you would be paying 14% of your income for the privilege of living in New York City now that you live in Miami? You've actually done what Kevin O'Leary is suggesting here, which is you're highly successful, relocate basically the Buck Sexton enterprise to Miami and save yourself a lot of money in the process.
There are so many people down here. I have friends in finance, in the real estate game, corporate lawyers, all telling the same story down here in South Florida and other parts of Florida as well. And a lot of people felt like they had to move because of COVID. And that was my primary reason too, because I was so angry and felt like I had to do something, take some action after the tyranny that New York and the libs engaged in during COVID. But once you start looking at regulatory policy, taxation, and now politicized civil judgments, right? I mean, you could probably say to yourself, well, I'm not Trump. I'm not going to get, in trouble because I'm not taking on the entire Democrat apparatus myself. And so they're probably not going to try to, throw me in prison for document fraud or something. But when you see what happened to, it was Elon in Delaware and now Trump civilly in New York for running his business, I keep asking friends of mine. I actually spoke to someone on the Trump campaign about this yesterday too. Just curious. I was saying, what happens here? I mean, we've just the number we're talking about is what, 400 million plus.
Yes.
For him to appeal the New York State verdict, he has to either put up that cash or get a bond for all. Someone that basically else has to say that they will, have a surety bond or whatever it's called, to make sure that he will arrive in court for this and do this. He won't flee the country. Look, Trump's obviously not going to flee the country. He might be running the country again soon. But the point here is, I don't see how he doesn't end up having to try to write some kind of massive check, which is a punishment in and of itself as he's running for president. You know what I mean? What is the alternative to he has to write this check in New York? I don't see it.
There isn't one. He's going to have to put forward the money, which is why the goal is to try to humiliate and embarrass and bankrupt him. And I just want to say this. I understand a lot of you who are listening to us right now in California and New York and even the Chicago area, big, massive centers of commerce. And some of you got friends, family, you got kids in school, you can't move. If you can move, get out. I mean this honestly. You don't know how good life is in Texas, Tennessee, and Florida, and I'm just naming those three because there is no state income tax. The more successful you are, the less sense it makes for you to be funding broken left-wing governments in New York, California, and Illinois. And I'm using those three because that's where I'm seeing people flee the most, where you have high income tax rates and where the states are falling apart thanks to left-wing governance, effective one-party rule. I can't tell you how fabulous it is down here. And when you get down here, and look, I'm talking about the Tennessee area, Bucks down in Florida. A lot of you are listening. I think we're number one in Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. So we got a lot of you listening all over the state of Texas. We want these states to be redder. They're now driving the commerce of the United States. So if you're thinking generationally, I used to, you ever been out to Coronado or out in San Diego? Beautiful area of San Diego, tons of military out there. In 1940 or 1950, you could have traveled out to San Diego and you could have bought an incredible bungalow in what is effectively the Garden of Eden in the United States. And you could have afforded to live there on a middle-class salary. You could have been in the military. You could have been associated with a normal everyday job, cop, teacher, whatever it is. Can't do that anymore. Those are all multi-million-dollar homes. I'm telling you, that's going to happen all over Florida. It's going to happen all over Texas. It's going to happen all over Tennessee. And in 2045, you're going to leave Illinois or California or New York, and you're going to travel to one of those states, and you're going to think, why didn't we leave in the 2020s? Why have we waited and stayed behind and looked at what has happened in these other states? I'm telling you, the wheels of commerce are spinning, and all of the positive directions are going to be in red states that are pro-business, that are low tax, and that believe in America and American values. And it's only going to get faster, that flywheel of excellence. Everything's falling apart in New York and California and Illinois, and everything's going to be going well. And again, I'm just using as an example, there are certainly other states, but when you have no state income tax in Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, it's pretty damn good life down here.
Yeah, and in the blue states, they're going to have more and more problems because the leading blue states in terms of population and all the stuff we're talking about, New York and California, they are losing a portion of the tax base that they need, a critical portion of the tax base. I think something like in New York City, 1% of earners pay 40 to 50% of the taxes. 1% of that city is responsible for carrying effectively the budget of the city of New York. I mean, if you try to have 40 or 50% budget cuts, you're talking about, you got nothing left unless you're just going to start slashing pensions and, you're going to have like 5 cops on the beat. The whole thing is going to be an absolute mess. So that's why they're going to want federal bailouts. And that's why everything then, the bad decisions made by Democrat blue states are supposed to be effectively socialized through the federal government, picking up the losses that will come from these places. It's also one of the reasons why they want so much illegal migration into these places, because they want a new labor force that they can call upon and new votes that they can call upon who are I mean, the one thing they would say is, oh, we want illegals to pay taxes. Illegals are going to be getting tax refunds if they start actually filing for taxes, which they don't, but that's a whole other thing because they don't make enough money in the manual labor and service industry jobs that they have to be subject to taxation. So so this thing about, oh, they're going to increase the economy and everything. No, actually, that's not how it works. They're going to be a net drain on resources, which is why New York City is saying they need $14 billion or $12 billion over the next 3 years to deal with them.